G'day, mates. Our planet, this brilliant blue marble floating in the vastness of space, is a world we think we know so well. We've mapped its continents, climbed its highest peaks, and charted its sprawling deserts. We've sent probes to the furthest reaches of our solar system. Yet, right here, beneath the shimmering surface of our own oceans, lies a realm more alien and less explored than the dark side of the moon. We call this place the Mariana Trench. It's a colossal scar in the Earth's crust, a deep crescent-shaped canyon hidden beneath the waves of the western Pacific Ocean. If you were to take Mount Everest, the tallest mountain on our planet, and place it within this trench, its summit would still be submerged by more than a kilometer of water. The deepest part of this trench, a small slot-shaped valley at its southern end, bears a name that echoes with the spirit of exploration: Challenger Deep. Imagine descending into the ocean. The familiar sunlit world of vibrant coral reefs and darting fish quickly fades away as you enter the midnight zone, a realm of perpetual darkness. Here, the only light comes from the strange and wonderful bioluminescent creatures that have adapted to this eternal night. The pressure is the real monster here. At Challenger Deep, nearly 11 kilometers down, the pressure is over 1,000 times greater than at the surface. It is the equivalent of having 50 jumbo jets stacked on top of you. It's a force that can compress steel and pulverize bone. This environment is not just dark and under immense pressure, it is also freezing cold. The water temperature hovers just above freezing. For a long time, scientists believed that nothing could survive under such extreme conditions. How could anything possibly endure the crushing weight, the absolute darkness, and the glacial cold of the abyss? The story of exploring Challenger Deep is a tale of two distinct eras, separated by half a century but united by the same spirit of adventure. In 1960, two men, a Swiss oceanographer named Jacques Piccard and a US Navy lieutenant named Don Walsh, squeezed into a cramped, spherical pressure vessel. Their vessel, the Trieste, looked less like a sleek submarine and more like an underwater airship. They were venturing into a world that was, for all intents and purposes, as unknown as outer space. Then, for more than 50 years, silence. The abyss remained undisturbed. The technology to return safely was simply too complex and too expensive. Among a new generation of explorers was a visionary, the filmmaker and deep-sea explorer, James Cameron. In 2012, Cameron did what no one had done before. He made the journey to Challenger Deep alone, in his vessel, the Deep-Sea Challenger. Before any vessel could dare to plunge into the abyss, humanity first had to realize the abyss was even there. In the 19th century, naval vessels began the painstaking process of deep-sea sounding. It was during one of these expeditions, aboard a British survey ship called HMS Challenger, that the first hints of the Mariana Trench's extraordinary depth were discovered. In the western Pacific, their sounding lines kept spooling out, deeper and deeper, reaching a staggering depth of over 8 kilometers. They had found the deepest spot yet known on Earth. They named the area Challenger Deep in honor of their vessel, though they had no idea that they had only scratched the surface of its true, mind-boggling depth. The dream of visiting these deep places remained just that, a dream. It would take a revolution in thinking to create a machine capable of withstanding the hellish pressures of the deep. The invention of echo sounding using sound waves to measure depth replaced the cumbersome weighted lines. With each new survey, the picture of the Mariana Trench became clearer. The key to unlocking the deep ocean came from an unlikely place, not from a naval shipyard, but from the mind of a Swiss physicist named Auguste Piccard. In the 1930s, he designed and built a pressurized aluminium sphere attached to a massive hydrogen balloon, becoming the first person to reach the stratosphere. Piccard reasoned that if a balloon could lift a gondola into the thin air of the stratosphere, then a similar vehicle could be designed to sink into the dense water of the ocean. He called his invention the Bathyscaphe, from the Greek words for deep and ship. It consisted of two main parts, a heavy steel crew cabin suspended beneath a large float. This float wasn't filled with air, but with gasoline. Since gasoline is lighter than water and virtually incompressible, it would provide buoyancy without being crushed by the immense pressure. To ascend, it would use a clever system of electromagnets holding tons of iron shot. When the time came to return, the pilot would simply cut the electrical current, releasing the ballast. As the Piccards perfected their Bathyscaphe in Europe, Another powerhouse of exploration was turning its attention to the abyss, the United States Navy. Fresh from the technological triumphs of the Second World War, the United States Navy had a keen strategic interest in the deep ocean. The United States Navy purchased one of Picard's Bathyscaphes, the Trieste, bringing it to San Diego, California. Among the Navy personnel was a young, sharp, and incredibly calm lieutenant named Don Walsh. He was a submariner by trade, chosen for his coolness under pressure. The team in San Diego worked tirelessly, reinforcing the Trieste for a dive far deeper than any that had been attempted before. Every weld, every bolt, and every electrical connection was scrutinized and tested. They knew that at 11,000 meters the slightest flaw would result in catastrophic implosion. The modified Trieste was a strange and wonderful beast. It was enormous, over 18 meters long, with its massive buoyant float filled with more than 85,000 liters of gasoline. Tucked underneath was the tiny but incredibly strong crew sphere, just 2 meters in diameter. Inside it was cramped, packed with dials, oxygen tanks, and a small cone-shaped window. In late 1959, the United States Navy launched Project Nekton, the official name for the mission to dive to the bottom of the Mariana Trench. The Trieste was loaded onto a freighter and transported across the Pacific to Guam, the closest naval base to the trench. The team ran a series of progressively deeper test dives near Guam, pushing the Bathyscaphe and its systems, giving the pilots valuable experience. On the eve of the historic dive, a storm rolled in, damaging some of the surface equipment, including a communication line. They would be truly alone on their descent. On the morning of January 23, 1960, Don Walsh and Jacques Picard climbed through the narrow hatch and sealed themselves inside the cold steel sphere. As the support crew flooded the ballast tanks, the mighty Trieste slowly slipped beneath the waves of the Pacific. Their journey into the great silent unknown abyss had finally begun. Sealed inside their tiny steel bubble, the world they knew vanished as the brilliant blue outside their tiny porthole faded rapidly to a deep indigo, then to a murky twilight. Within minutes, they were plunged into a profound and absolute blackness, a darkness more complete than the deepest cave or the most starless night. Their 5-hour descent was accompanied by the unnerving groans and creaks of the Bathyscaphe structure, a constant reminder of the immense forces building outside. Inside the sphere, the temperature began to plummet. The men, bundled in warm clothing, could see their breath condensing in the frigid air. At a depth of around 9,000 meters, a sudden violent jolt shook the entire Bathyscaphe. It was accompanied by a loud cracking bang that shot adrenaline through both men. In that terrifying moment, their first thought was the one they dreaded most: implosion. They instinctively braced for the end, for the sea to rush in and crush them in an instant. After a tense investigation, they discovered the source. An outer pane of the multi-layered plexiglass viewing window had cracked under the immense pressure. While the crack was on an outer, non-structural pane and posed no immediate danger, it was a visceral reminder of the hostile world just centimeters away from them. This would have been enough to convince most people to abort the mission. But Walsh and Picard were test pilots and explorers, selected for their calm approach to danger. After carefully assessing the situation, they made a bold decision. They would continue their descent. They had come this far and were so close to their final goal. After nearly 5 hours of relentless descent, the sonar altimeter began to show the seafloor rapidly nearing. The final few hundred meters were a period of intense focus. With a soft, gentle bump, the Trieste touched down. A small puff of pale, fine sediment billowed up around them. They had landed. The depth gauge read 10,916 meters. It was 1:06 p.m. on January 23, 1960. For the first time in human history, mankind had reached the deepest known point on planet Earth. The view outside was stark, alien, and profound. The seafloor was not a dramatic landscape of jagged rocks, but a flat, uniform plain of creamy-colored silt. The water was clear, and the silence was absolute. They were the sole inhabitants of a world that had been untouched and unseen for millennia. Their time at the bottom was brief, limited by the constraints of their life support and the long ascent ahead. They had only about 20 minutes to make observations. In that brief window of time on the bottom, As Don Walsh peered out into the illuminated silt, he saw something that would change biology forever. He spotted a creature moving through the ooze. It was a flatfish, something like a sole or a flounder, about 30 centimeters long. It swam slowly away from the Bathyscaphe, disturbed by their landing. In that moment, a fundamental question that had driven scientists for a century was answered. Life could exist at the very bottom of the ocean. It was not a sterile dead zone. The existence of a fish at this depth implied a whole ecosystem must be in place to support it. There had to be smaller creatures for it to feed on, and a food chain deriving energy from organic matter from miles above. After 20 minutes on the bottom, the time had come to leave. With the flick of a switch, they released the tons of iron-shot ballast. Freed from its weight, the buoyant Trieste began its journey back to the surface. The ascent took 3 hours and 15 minutes. They passed back through the layers of the ocean, returning to the familiar embrace of the sunlit world. When the Trieste finally broke the surface of the Pacific, it was met by a vast and empty ocean. During their 9-hour journey, the Bathyscaphe had drifted with the currents. Eventually, a search plane spotted them, and the destroyer escort steamed into view. The relief on the faces of the crew was palpable. As they climbed out onto the deck, blinking in the bright afternoon sun, Walsh and Picard were no longer just a Navy lieutenant and a Swiss scientist. They were heroes. They were the Armstrong and Aldrin of the deep ocean, pioneers who had ventured into a hostile environment and returned with stories of a new frontier. They had not only survived the abyss, but they had also brought back news that would forever change our understanding of life on our own planet. The return to the light was the beginning of a new chapter in ocean science. The news of their successful dive spread like wildfire around the globe. In an era captivated by the space race and the Cold War, the conquest of Challenger Deep was hailed as a monumental achievement. President Dwight D. Eisenhower himself awarded the men medals at a ceremony in the White House. They became overnight sensations, their faces gracing magazine covers. They embarked on lecture tours, sharing their incredible story. Their tale was one of classic adventure, a narrative of man against the elements pushing into the unknown. Yet amidst all the fame, the most important part of their story was often the most debated. Their claim of seeing a flatfish was met with some skepticism in the scientific community. Without a photograph or a specimen, it was just an eyewitness account. Some biologists argued that a vertebrate couldn't possibly survive the pressure. This debate only highlighted the profound importance of their observation. It created a burning question that would drive deep-sea science for decades to come. The fleeting glimpse of life in Challenger Deep had an impact far beyond oceanography. At the time, there was a controversial proposal to use deep ocean trenches as dumping grounds for nuclear waste. Walsh and Picard's discovery changed everything. The confirmation that complex life existed at the very bottom proved these weren't barren deserts, but living ecosystems. The Trieste's discovery directly influenced the international community to abandon the idea, leading to treaties that now prohibit such deep-sea dumping. Beyond this immediate policy impact, the dive ignited a new wave of interest in Hadal science, the study of environments deeper than 6,000 meters. The knowledge that life could thrive under such extreme pressure opened up entirely new fields of inquiry into extremophiles and their unique adaptations. The discovery also had profound implications for the search for life beyond Earth. The creatures of Challenger Deep provide a model for what alien life in dark subterranean oceans might look like. Despite the monumental success and profound scientific implications of the 1960 dive, an eerie quiet fell over Challenger Deep. For more than half a century, no human would return. The Trieste, having accomplished its ultimate mission, was retired soon after. It was an incredible machine for its time, but it was also a blunt instrument with limited scientific capabilities. The focus of government funding and public imagination shifted decisively upwards, towards space. The race to the moon was in full swing, and exploring the cosmos felt like the ultimate expression of human destiny. During this long silence, unmanned vehicles became the primary tools for deep-sea research. ROVs and AUVs could stay down for days at a time, mapping the seafloor and collecting samples. These robots visited Challenger Deep, and confirmed thriving communities of microbes and invertebrates, but the magic of human presence was gone. The dream of returning, however, never fully died. It lived on in the minds of a new generation of explorers, engineers, and adventurers who dreamed of a new vehicle. The man who would break the 50-year silence was James Cameron, a name synonymous with Hollywood blockbusters like Titanic and Avatar. But long before he was a famous director, he was a kid who dreamed of underwater worlds. Cameron's fascination with the ocean was not a casual hobby, it was a lifelong quest. He had logged thousands of hours in submersibles, exploring shipwrecks like the Titanic and the Bismarck with a fleet of custom-built robotic vehicles. But for him, the ultimate challenge remained. Challenger Deep was the Everest of his world, the one place he had to see with his own eyes. This was not a mission funded by a government. Cameron financed the project himself, assembling a small, dedicated team of engineers and scientists in secret in Australia. The goal was fundamentally different from the 1960 mission. While the Trieste's dive was about proving it could be done, Cameron's mission was about what you could do once you got there. The vessel that Cameron and his team created was unlike any submersible ever built. Named the Deep-Sea Challenger, it was a radical departure from the slow, clumsy Bathyscaphe design of the Trieste. Instead of a horizontal craft, the Deep-Sea Challenger was a sleek, vertical vehicle, shaped like a torpedo standing on its end. This innovative design was all about speed and efficiency. The submersible was a marvel of modern materials science. The main structure was made from a unique, structurally enhanced syntactic foam, incredibly buoyant, yet strong enough to withstand crushing pressure. At the bottom of this 10-meter-long vehicle was the pilot sphere. It was even more cramped than the Trieste's cabin, a tiny metal ball just over a meter in diameter. Every inch of the Deep-Sea Challenger was packed with cutting-edge technology. It bristled with powerful LED lights, multiple high-definition 3D cameras, and a robotic arm for collecting samples. The construction and testing of this one-of-a-kind vehicle was a monumental undertaking, filled with setbacks and breakthroughs. The team had to invent new systems and components. On March 26, 2012, the day of the historic dive finally arrived. The sea was calm, the sky was clear. James Cameron squeezed into the tiny pilot sphere and was sealed inside. He was entirely alone. This would be the first solo dive to the deepest point on the planet. As the submersible was released from its support ship, it began its rapid descent, a 2.5-hour fall into the crushing blackness of the Mariana Trench. For Cameron, this was the culmination of years of dreaming and planning. Unlike Walsh and Piccard, who were largely cut off from the surface, Cameron was in constant communication via acoustic data link. As he neared the bottom, he slowed the submersible's descent. The powerful LED lights cut through the eternal darkness, revealing the seafloor with unprecedented clarity. He touched down gently on the soft, silty bottom, landing in a different area of Challenger Deep than the Trieste had. The silence that followed was profound. He had made it. The images James Cameron captured were nothing short of revolutionary. For the first time, the world could see Challenger Deep in crystal-clear, high-definition 3D. The footage revealed a delicate, otherworldly landscape. The seafloor was not a barren wasteland, but a gently undulating plain of fine, pale sediment, almost like fresh snow. There were no signs of the flatfish that Walsh and Piccard had reported, but the environment was far from lifeless. Cameron observed strange, small amphipods swimming in front of his viewport. His mission was a triumph for science. The samples he collected revealed a thriving community of microbes, including bacteria and single-celled organisms previously unknown to science. Beyond the scientific data, the dive had a massive cultural impact. The resulting documentary brought the experience of visiting the abyss to a global audience. It reignited public interest in ocean exploration, reminding a new generation that there are still incredible adventures to be had on our own planet. The story of Challenger Deep is more than just a tale of two incredible dives. It is a story about the very nature of human curiosity, our innate desire to push boundaries and journey to the edge of our maps. These expeditions were about answering fundamental questions. Is there life in the most hostile place on Earth? How does it survive? What can this alien world teach us? The pioneers gave us the first answer. Yes, the abyss is alive. Decades later, Cameron began to show us just how beautifully strange and complex that life truly is. The allure of the abyss is also tied to its immense fragility. These dives have taught us that the deep ocean is intrinsically connected to the rest of the planet through ocean currents and biological cycles. The decision not to dump nuclear waste in the trenches, influenced directly by the Trieste's findings, showed that exploration is not just for discovery, but for stewardship. The stories of these voyages inspire us. They remind us that there are still incredible wonders to be found right here on Earth, hidden beneath the waves. The abyss continues to call to us, its depths holding secrets we are only just beginning to understand. The journey into the great unknown is far from over. The future of exploring places like Challenger Deep will likely be a powerful partnership between human and robotic explorers, our tireless proxies in the eternal night of the Hadal Zone. The abyss awaits, a vast, dark, and beautiful world, holding the answers to questions we have not yet even thought to ask. The journey continues.